The wind off the Scioto River cut through my jacket like a warning I should have heeded months ago. February in Ohio doesn't forgive mistakes, neither structural nor personal. I stood 60 feet above the frozen water, my boots planted on temporary scaffolding, examining hairline fractures in the concrete that most engineers would have missed. "Ethan, we've got maybe 40 minutes before this cold locks up the equipment," my site foreman called up. I ran my gloved hand along the stress point. 18 months of micro-vibrations from heavy truck traffic had created a propagation pattern that would have failed catastrophically within 2 years. The kind of slow degradation that kills people because nobody bothered to look close enough. "Mark it for immediate remediation," I said. "Full-depth repair, not a surface patch. I don't care what the county budget says." That was Friday, February 7th, 2025. I remember because I'd promised Rachel I'd be home early for our anniversary dinner. 19 years. We'd made it 19 years without kids, without the suburban script everyone else followed, and I'd convinced myself that made us stronger. Two professionals who chose each other every single day. What a load of garbage. I pulled into our driveway in German Village around 6, the Victorian we'd gutted and rebuilt together, glowing warm against the gray sky. Rachel's Audi sat in its usual spot. Through the front window, I could see her curled on the leather sectional, tablet in hand, probably closing another deal. She'd built her HR consulting firm from nothing. Remote work had exploded since COVID, and Rachel had positioned herself perfectly. Tech startups paid her obscene money to tell them how to keep their distributed teams from imploding. Irony's a real piece of work. "Hey, you're early." She looked up when I came through the door, that smile still doing something to my chest after all these years. Auburn hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. "I just finalized the Vertex contract. 6 figures, 18 months. "That's incredible." I kissed her forehead, breathing in that familiar jasmine. "Shower first, then I'm taking you to Barcelona." "Ooh, fancy." She set down her tablet. "I have something for you. Early present." The box was small, weathered. Inside, nestled in velvet, sat a brass surveyor's compass from the 1890s. The kind my grandfather would have used. "Found it at that estate sale in Grandview," she said. "The dealer said it belonged to someone who worked on the original Broad Street Bridge." I turned it over in my hands. The weight of it. The precision. "Rach, this is—" I didn't have words. "I know how much you love things that last." She squeezed my arm. "Like us." I set the compass on the mantel, next to our wedding photo from that snowy December day in Schiller Park. 2 kids in their 20s who thought they had it all figured out. "We're perfectly aligned," I told her. "No deviations." She laughed, but something flickered behind her eyes. I caught her glancing toward the window, where the Norfolk Southern line ran past the edge of our neighborhood. Trains had always fascinated her. That movement, that escape velocity. "Daydreaming?" I asked. "Always." She stood on her toes to kiss me properly. "Go shower. I'm starving." The next week blurred into the usual rhythm. Site visits, Monday and Wednesday, remote modeling Tuesday and Thursday, Friday reserved for contractor meetings. Rachel ran her empire from the converted attic office, her voice filtering down through the floorboards as she coached some Silicon Valley startup through their latest HR crisis. I came home Tuesday evening to find her on a call, pacing the living room with that intensity she got when money was on the line. "Look, Kevin, I understand you want to move fast, but if you fire your whole operations team without documentation, you're looking at wrongful termination suits that'll eat your Series B for breakfast." Pause. "Yes, I know the VCs are breathing down your neck. That's why you're paying me. Let me handle it." She hung up and threw herself onto the couch. "Why do tech bros think employment law doesn't apply to them?" "Because venture capital has convinced them they're special." I handed her a glass of wine. "Rough day?" "They're all rough days, but profitable, so I can't complain." She clinked her glass against mine. How was the bridge? Still standing, which is more than I can say for half the infrastructure in this state. We fell into comfortable silence, the kind married people develop after 19 years. I should have noticed how often those silences had started to stretch lately. How her mind seemed to drift somewhere I couldn't follow. Saturday night, we'd just opened a bottle of the Willamette Pinot she loved when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen, and something shifted in her face. Just for a second, a micro-expression I'd cataloged from 19 years of marriage. Spam, she said, silencing it. Looked like a real number. Probably some recruiter. They never stop. She tucked her feet under her on the couch, wine glass catching firelight. Pour me more? I did, noting the area code on the screen before it went dark. 513. Cincinnati. Rachel's distant cousin, she'd supposedly cut ties with back in 2019, had a 513 number. I'd never met the woman, which had always struck me as odd for someone so allegedly close. Blake's driving me insane, Rachel said, launching into one of her workplace rants. Blake was her colleague, some consultant she partnered with on West Coast accounts. He keeps suggesting we do this leadership retreat in Napa, and I keep telling him our clients don't have that kind of budget. But he just doesn't listen. Last week, I let her talk, but the story felt rehearsed. Too many details, too smooth in the delivery. When Rachel lied, she over-explained. I'd learned that early in our marriage when she'd forgotten to tell me about a credit card she'd opened. Little lie. We'd worked through it. What if we just disappeared? She said suddenly, setting down her glass. What? You and me. Sell the house, cash out, go somewhere warm. Her eyes had that gleam. Portugal or Costa Rica. Just start over. We have careers, Rach, responsibilities, a mortgage. I know, she waved her hand. Just a fantasy. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget. That word, fantasy, lingered in the air like smoke. She moved closer, that familiar warmth pressing against me. Wine on her breath, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. I missed you this week, she murmured. You're always on some site visit, and I'm always on calls, and sometimes I wonder if we're even living in the same house anymore. We're here now. Are we? Her eyes searched mine. Sometimes you feel so far away. We ended up in the bedroom, and I told myself the distant feeling was just exhaustion. Just the weight of a long week. Bodies moving through familiar patterns. Pleasure that felt mechanical in ways I didn't want to examine. Later, while she slept, I scrolled through my messages. One from Megan, Rachel's best friend since college. Hey, can we talk sometime? About R. Worried about her. I typed back, everything okay? Just, she asked me to cover for her on something. Girls' trip that didn't happen. Probably nothing. Forget I said anything. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, actually, don't forget. But don't tell her I said anything either. I didn't sleep well that night. The coat check incident happened on a Thursday, 2 weeks into February. I'd worn my heavy wool overcoat to a client dinner downtown, the kind of schmoozy affair my firm required for major projects. When I reached into the pocket for my parking ticket, my fingers found paper, crumpled, hidden, a train ticket stub. One way, Columbus to Cincinnati, dated January 18th. 3 weeks earlier. Rachel hadn't mentioned any trip to Cincinnati. Not a word. I stood in our front hallway, the house silent around me, and felt something cold settle into my bones. The engineer in me, the part trained to identify failure points before they became catastrophic, started running calculations I didn't want to finish. That night, while Rachel was on a call with a West Coast client, I went through her coat pockets, her desk drawers, the bottom of her closet where she kept old purses. More stubs. 4 trips total, stretching back to October. and a hotel key card from the Hilton Netherland Plaza, a fancy downtown Cincinnati spot where we'd once attended a wedding. I remembered the room. Riverview, marble bathroom, Rachel in a blue dress that made me forget there was a reception we were supposed to attend. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I felt something close to clinical, like I was inspecting damaged infrastructure, cataloging the extent of the failure before I could let myself feel it. At dinner, I waited until she'd poured her wine and taken her first bite. Find any good errands lately? She looked up from her salmon. Been anywhere interesting? Day trips, that kind of thing? Just the usual. Kroger, the dry cleaner. She smiled. Why, you planning a surprise? No reason. She held my gaze for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for a truthful person, short enough for a liar. Then she went back to her food. We should plan a trip, she said. Maybe that B&B in Hocking Hills? Get away from screens for a weekend. Sure. The word tasted like ash. I could use a break. Blake's been on my case about this Portland client, and honestly, I'm running on fumes. Sometimes I just want to disappear somewhere quiet, you know? There was that word again. Disappear. After she went to bed, I stood at the living room window, watching the last freight train of the night rumble past. The tracks gleamed in the streetlight, that endless parallel path leading somewhere else. Something had jumped the rail. I just didn't know how bad the wreck would be. Sunday, February 16th. I'd spent the week preparing like I was engineering a controlled demolition. Synced our shared calendar with her phone's location history through the family account she'd forgotten I could access. Cross-referenced her therapy appointments and client coffees with the timeline on those ticket stubs. The patterns matched. Every Cincinnati trip coincided with a suspicious gap in her schedule. She was in the kitchen making tea when I came downstairs. Sunday morning light streamed through the windows. Pancakes on the griddle, the smell of maple syrup hanging in the air. A domestic scene from a life that no longer existed. I set the ticket stubs on the counter. The hotel key card. The printout of her location data. Explain. Rachel's face went through about 4 emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise, fear, calculation, and something that looked almost like relief, like she'd been waiting for this. Ethan, I can explain. Then explain. It's an old friend from before us. We reconnected on LinkedIn and we've been catching up. That's all. Catching up. Yes? I picked up the hotel key card. At the Netherland Plaza? For 4 separate visits? She set down the spatula. Her hand trembled slightly. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. His name is Derek Harmon. We dated in college before I transferred to Ohio State. He's a VP at some tech company in Cincinnati now. We started talking last summer. Just professional stuff at first. He was dealing with some HR issues, wanted advice. And then? She closed her eyes. And then it became more. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and set it on the counter between us. I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer them honestly. If you lie to me again, I walk out that door and you can explain to a judge why I should have to pay for your hotel suites. Ethan, please, when did it become physical? The pause lasted a lifetime. I watched her compose and discard 6 responses. Watched the lies form and dissolve behind her eyes. November, she whispered. The week you were in Cleveland for the bridge project. How many times? How many times, Rachel? 6, maybe 7. Tears now, streaming down her face. It just happened. I didn't plan it. I was feeling lost, like my whole life was planned out to the last detail, and he made me feel like what? Like a person who wasn't married? Like I had choices. She grabbed for my hand. I pulled back. You don't understand. Everything with us is scheduled, optimized, engineered. When's the last time we did something spontaneous? When's the last time you looked at me like I was more than a fixture in your life? So instead of talking to me, your husband of 19 years, you took a train to another city to sleep with your college boyfriend. He understood me. He listened. I'm standing right here, Rachel. I've been standing right here for 2 decades. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I ended it last week. I told him it was over. You ended it after you got sloppy. I picked up my phone, stopped the recording. Guest room, tonight. Don't touch the joint accounts, don't contact your boyfriend, don't talk to anyone about this until I figure out what I'm doing. Ethan, please. We can work through this. Counseling, whatever you need. I'll do anything. What I need is for the last 6 months to not have happened. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something inside me turn to stone. You don't blow up a marriage with an apology, Rachel. You demolish the foundation. Now I have to decide whether anything's worth salvaging. So that's it? 19 years and you're just going to walk away? You walked away first, 6 times, maybe 7, remember? I walked out of the kitchen, into my home office and locked the door. Then I got to work. Here's what most people don't understand about civil engineering. We don't just build things. We predict how things fail. We model stress points, calculate load tolerances, anticipate the exact conditions under which a structure will collapse. Rachel had handed me a catastrophic failure, and my training kicked in automatically. By Monday morning, I'd changed the master codes on our smart home system, legal in Ohio, since the house was joint property and I wasn't preventing her access, just controlling the security settings. I documented her confession with timestamps and cross-referenced it against our financial records, which showed a credit card I'd never seen before with charges at Cincinnati hotels, lingerie boutiques, and high-end restaurants. Total damage, $23,000 in charges I hadn't known about. I called in sick to work for the first time in 6 years. Sat in my office with a legal pad and started drafting what I came to think of as the remediation plan. First call, Jim Forsyth, a PI my firm had used for corporate due diligence. Retired Columbus PD, by the book, exactly what I needed. Infidelity case? His voice was sandpaper and coffee. Documentation only. I want dates, locations, photographs, all Ohio compliant. Nothing that crosses a line. Smart. Most guys in your position, they want to break down doors. Ends up hurting them in court. I'm not most guys. I build things for a living. Right now I'm building a case. Give me a week. I'll have something solid. Second call. Vic Morales, senior partner at Stanton & Associates, a firm that handled contracts for my company. I'd worked with him for 8 years, and I knew he had a divorce practice on the side. Ethan, what the hell? You and Rachel. I need options, Vic, not sympathy. Fair enough. Can you come by Tuesday? Bring everything you have. The more documentation, the better our position. Rachel tried 3 times that day to talk to me. Knocked on my office door with offers of coffee, lunch. Just 5 minutes to talk, please. I didn't respond. I could hear her crying through the walls, and I felt absolutely nothing. That scared me more than the betrayal itself. The texts started Tuesday. Rachel. Please, just talk to me. I'm going crazy in here. Rachel. I know I messed up, I know, but we can fix this. Rachel. Ethan, you can't just shut me out. That's not fair. Rachel. I've been crying for 2 days straight. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Is that what you want? Rachel. He meant nothing. You are my life. Please believe me. I didn't respond. Not because I was being cruel, though maybe I was, but because I knew anything I said would be used against me later. Emotional responses in divorce cases were liability. I'd learned that much from Vic. Wednesday morning, she intercepted me in the kitchen. You have to talk to me eventually. No, I don't. Ethan, this is insane. We're living in the same house. We're married. You can't just pretend I don't exist. Watch me. I'm going to call a couples counselor. Dr. Whitmore. She's supposed to be the best in Columbus. I already left a message. We can start as early as next week. You can do whatever you want. I won't be there. Her face crumpled. Why are you being like this? I made a mistake. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean we throw away almost 2 decades of marriage. You threw it away, Rachel. When you got on that train the first time, when you walked into that hotel room, when you looked me in the eye and lied about where you'd been. I poured my coffee, not looking at her. You don't get to decide what we throw away anymore. So that's it? You're just going to punish me forever? I'm not punishing you. I'm deciding what to do with the rest of my life. That takes time. How much time? As long as it takes. She stood there in her robe, hair unwashed, eyes red from crying. Part of me recognized that she was genuinely suffering. Part of me didn't care. I'll wait, she said finally. However long you need. I'll wait. I took my coffee to the office and locked the door. Instead of engaging, I focused on the work. Tuesday afternoon, I met with Vic at his downtown office. Glass walls, modern furniture, the kind of place that screamed billable hours. He listened without interrupting as I laid out everything. The ticket stubs, the hotel key card, the confession recording, the secret credit card. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You've been thorough. That's my job. Ohio's a no-fault state, which means the affair itself doesn't automatically give you an advantage. But, he held up a finger. Financial misconduct changes things. That $23,000 in hidden debt, if we can prove she was using marital assets to fund the affair without your knowledge, we're looking at dissipation of assets. That shifts the equation significantly. What about the house? That's trickier. Did you sign a post-nuptial agreement? Actually, yes. Back in 2019. I'd almost forgotten about it. A document we'd signed after some vague doubts I couldn't articulate at the time. Cold feet about our 15-year anniversary, maybe. Standard boilerplate, but it included clauses about financial disclosure and misconduct. Vic's eyebrows rose. Pull that out. If it's what I think it is, we might have more leverage than I thought. Jim called Wednesday with preliminary findings. Your wife's boyfriend is Derek Harmon, VP of Operations at Crescent Dynamics, mid-sized tech outfit, venture-backed. He's married, 2 kids, lives in Indian Hill. That's the wealthy suburb south of Cincinnati. Married. Wife's name is Amanda. Kids are 12 and 9. Nice family photos on Facebook. Soccer games, beach vacations, the whole package. I gripped the phone tighter. So he's running the same play on his wife that he ran on mine. Worse than that. I did some digging. This isn't Harmon's first rodeo. I've got records of at least 3 previous affairs going back a decade. All with women in professional contexts, conferences, LinkedIn connections, that kind of thing. One led to a harassment settlement his company buried. He's a predator. That's a strong word, but yeah, he's got a system. Targets women who are professionally connected, makes them feel special, strings them along with promises about leaving his wife. Never does. I wrote it all down. What about my wife's involvement? How deep does it go? That's where it gets interesting. She's been promoting his company on her professional channels, recommending Crescent Dynamics to her clients, linking to their case studies. There's a commission structure there, finder's fees for contracts she brings in. She's getting paid by her lover's company. About $47,000 over the past year. All undisclosed, routed through a shell account she set up in August. I sat back in my chair. This wasn't just an affair. This was a full-scale betrayal. Emotional, financial, professional. Everything I thought I knew about my wife was a lie built on lies. Keep digging, I said. I want everything. That night, Rachel tried a different approach. She appeared at my office door in the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas, the one that left very little to imagination. Eyes red from crying, but carefully made up. Hair down the way I'd always liked it. Can we please talk? I miss you. I miss us. There is no us right now. There's you and there's me and there's a mess you created. I'll do anything, counseling, transparency, whatever it takes. She stepped into the doorway, and I could smell her perfume, the expensive stuff she saved for special occasions. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But we have 19 years, Ethan. Doesn't that count for anything? You want transparency? I turned my monitor toward her, showing a spreadsheet of her hidden credit card charges. Explain the $23,000 on the Visa card I didn't know existed. Explain the finder's fees from your boyfriend's company. Explain why you were on the phone with him at 2 a.m. last Tuesday, telling him to leave Amanda because you couldn't do this halfway anymore. Her face went white. How did you... Home security system, the one I installed last year. I'd added audio monitoring to my office as a remote work precaution, and the system logged everything. One-party consent state, Rachel. I can record anything I'm part of, and this is my house too. That's... You've been spying on me? I've been documenting my wife's affair. There's a difference. She stood there, robe suddenly looking cheap instead of seductive, her whole narrative collapsing. I love you, she said, voice breaking. I know that doesn't mean anything right now, but I do. This thing with Derek was... It was an escape, a fantasy. It wasn't real. It was real enough to cost us $23,000. Real enough for you to tell him you couldn't do this halfway. Real enough to destroy 19 years of marriage. Marriage isn't destroyed, Ethan. It's damaged. There's a difference. I'm an engineer, Rachel. I know the difference between damage and demolition. This isn't a crack we patch. This is a foundation failure. She left. I heard her sobbing in the guest room until well past midnight. I kept working. Megan called me directly the following Saturday. Rachel's best friend since college, the one who'd texted me that cryptic warning 3 weeks earlier. She's going to kill me for this, Megan said. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Can we meet? Just us? We met at a coffee shop in Clintonville, far from German Village. Neutral territory. Megan looked like she hadn't slept in days. Guilt does that to people. How much do you know? She asked, wrapping both hands around her latte like it was the only warm thing in her life. Enough to file for divorce, but I want to hear it from you. She took a long breath. She's been doing this forever, Ethan. Not the cheating. I don't think there was anyone before Derek, but the fantasies, the escape plans. She has journals going back to before you got married. What if scenarios about old boyfriends, about different lives she could have lived? And you knew about this. I knew she was restless. I didn't know she'd act on it. Megan finally met my eyes. She called me in October, asking me to cover for her. Said she was meeting an old friend, didn't want you to worry. I told her she was playing with fire. I told her whatever she thought she was doing, it wasn't worth it. But she did it anyway. She said it was just dinner, just catching up. I wanted to believe her. Megan's voice cracked. I should have told you then. I should have. Why didn't you? Because she's my best friend. Because I thought maybe it was innocent. Just closure on something old. Because I was an idiot. She shook her head. I was wrong. I was so wrong. What else do you know about Derek? Megan's expression darkened. He's a predator, Ethan. He does this, finds women who are vulnerable, makes them feel special, promises he'll leave his wife. Rachel's not the first. She won't be the last. His company's under FTC scrutiny, I said. Fake metrics, inflated user counts. Rachel's been promoting them to her clients. Oh, God. Megan put her head in her hands. She's going to lose everything. She already has. When I left the coffee shop, I had something valuable. Confirmation that Rachel's behavior wasn't a midlife crisis. It was a pattern, dormant for years, finally activated by the right predator at the right moment. Not that it excused anything, but it helped me understand what I was dealing with. March arrived cold and relentless. I'd moved into full operational mode, treating the dissolution of my marriage like any other complex project. Timelines, milestones, deliverables. Jim's PI work continued to pay dividends. He documented 3 additional meetings between Rachel and Derek, including one at a hotel in Dayton, neutral territory, they probably thought. He'd also uncovered something that made my stomach turn. "She's not his only one," Jim said over the phone. "I've got eyes on at least 2 other women he's stringing along right now, all connected through his company's vendor network." Does she know? Doubt it. These guys compartmentalize. Makes them feel like geniuses until it all blows up. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel had thrown away our marriage for a man who had 2 or 3 backup options. She wasn't even his primary affair. She was part of a rotation. Meanwhile, I hired the forensic accountant Vic had recommended, a wiry woman named Patricia, who looked at financial records the way I looked at stress fractures. She set up shop at my kitchen table for 2 straight days, laptops and spreadsheets covering every surface, tracking money flows like she was mapping a river system. "Your wife is clever," she said on the second day, rubbing her eyes. I'll give her that. The shell account is buried under 3 layers of LLC structures. Anyone doing a casual audit would miss it completely. But you found it. That's what you're paying me for. She turned her laptop to show me a diagram of accounts. Here's what happened. In August of last year, she created a consulting LLC called Paradigm Solutions. On paper, it's a subsidiary of her main business, handles overflow clients, that kind of thing. Totally legitimate. Let me guess, no overflow clients. Not a single one. Instead, it's receiving direct payments from Crescent Dynamics. The payments are structured as referral fees, technically legal, except she never disclosed them to her clients or to you. And the amounts are suspicious. $8,000 here, $12,000 there. Always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting. She's been laundering her affair. In a manner of speaking, the finder's fees from Derek's company totaled $47,000, none of it disclosed on your joint tax returns. That's fraud, Ethan. Not marriage-ending fraud, tax fraud. That's a problem, I said slowly. Understatement. If the IRS audits you, this looks like intentional underreporting. Depending on how they interpret it, your wife could be looking at civil penalties at minimum, criminal charges if they decide she was deliberately hiding assets. What are my options? File amended returns immediately. Document that you had no knowledge of the income. It won't protect her, but it protects you. The paper trail shows you as the innocent spouse. I filed the amended returns that week, creating a record that would protect me and implicate Rachel. Every step was legal, documented, defensible, just like building a bridge. The forced couples dinner happened on a Saturday in mid-March. Megan had insisted, one last attempt to find common ground, she called it. I suspected she was hoping for a miracle, some breakthrough that would let her avoid choosing sides. Work had become my refuge during those weeks. My junior colleague, Marcus, had noticed the change in me, the longer hours, the obsessive attention to detail, the way I threw myself into every project like my sanity depended on it. "You okay, boss?" he asked one afternoon, after I'd spent 3 hours reviewing calculations he'd already triple-checked. "You seem different lately." "Personal stuff. Don't worry about it." "My parents went through a divorce when I was 16, he said quietly. Dad buried himself in work for about a year afterward. Looked a lot like what you're doing now?" I stared at him. This kid barely 30, trying to mentor me through something he recognized from his childhood. "Thanks, Marcus," I appreciate the concern. Just saying, work can be a distraction, but it doesn't fix anything. The stuff you're avoiding will still be there when you stop. He was right, of course, but he didn't understand that I wasn't avoiding anything. I was building something. A case. A future. A version of my life that didn't include the woman who'd destroyed it. We met at a restaurant in the short north, surrounded by happy couples and first dates. The kind of place where cheating spouses probably conducted their affairs all the time. Rachel arrived looking like she'd spent 3 hours preparing. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, the emerald dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. War paint for a battle she'd already lost. "Thank you for doing this," she said as we sat down. "I know you didn't want to." Megan asked. Megan herself looked uncomfortable, caught between loyalty to Rachel and growing disgust at what she'd learned. I'd shared some of Jim's findings with her, not everything, but enough. "We need to talk about what happens next," Rachel said, reaching for the wine list. "I can't keep living in the guest room, Ethan. It's killing me. You should have thought about that before Cincinnati. I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But we have 19 years of history. 19 years of building something together. Doesn't that count for anything?" Megan shifted in her seat. "Maybe you should tell him about the journal, Rach." Rachel's face froze. "What?" "The one from before you got married. The what-if scenarios. He should know." "Megan, that's private." "He deserves to know who he married." The silence stretched. Around us, other couples laughed and flirted, oblivious to the implosion happening at table 6. Rachel's composure cracked like cheap plaster. "Fine, yes." She set down her wine glass. "I've always had fantasies. Other lives I could have lived. Derek was one of them, from years ago. When he reached out last summer, it felt like the universe was giving me a second chance." "A second chance at what?" I asked. "At being single? You could have asked for a divorce." "I didn't want a divorce. I wanted, I don't know, something different. Something that made me feel alive. And I made you feel dead. You made me feel safe." Tears now, tracking mascara down her cheeks. And somehow that started feeling like a cage. Megan reached across the table, touching Rachel's hand. "Tell him the rest." Rachel shook her head. "Megan, tell him about the money, the finder's fees, the business relationship you've been building with Derek's company." "It wasn't like that." $47,000, Rachel. I kept my voice flat, controlled. "Undisclosed income from your boyfriend's company, funneled through your consulting business. That's not a personal affair anymore. That's professional misconduct. I was going to tell you, when? After you'd run off to Cincinnati permanently? After Derek left his wife and kids, which we both know was never going to happen?" The restaurant noise seemed to fade. Rachel sat there, unraveling, while Megan looked at her with something approaching pity. "He was never going to leave Amanda," Megan said quietly. "You know that, right? The kids, the house in Indian Hill, the country club membership. He was never going to give that up for anyone." Rachel's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, the way you feel sorry for someone who bet their life savings on a losing horse. Then I remembered the hotel receipts, the 2 a.m. phone calls, the $23,000 in secret charges, and the pity evaporated. "I think we're done here," I said. The FTC angle came together faster than I'd expected. Patricia's forensic review had uncovered the connection between Rachel's promotional work and Derek's company. But it was Jim who found the real prize. "Crescent Dynamics has been cooking their books for years," he told me during our weekly update call. "Inflating user engagement metrics by 300–400%. They use those fake numbers to secure 3 rounds of venture funding. We're talking about $50 million based on fraudulent data." "And Rachel's connection?" "She recommended Crescent to at least 15 of her startup clients. 3 of those clients invested directly based on the metrics Rachel was promoting. If those startups realize they got suckered because of her relationship with Harmon, they'll sue everyone in sight, including your wife. She wasn't a co-conspirator, but she was definitely a useful idiot. And the fact that she was getting paid while sleeping with the guy makes it look a lot worse. I sat with that for a moment. Rachel wasn't a criminal, but she'd allowed herself to become a tool for one. All because Derek Harmon had made her feel special. How do I use this? Carefully. You tip off the FTC anonymously. Let them handle the investigation. When Harmon goes down, Rachel goes down with him. But your hands stay clean. I filed the complaint that night. Anonymous, detailed, citing specific instances of inflated metrics and providing the contact information for startups that had invested based on Crescent's fake numbers. Then I waited. April brought the crack of spring and the first signs of real damage. I was at my desk on a Tuesday morning when the news broke. A push notification on my phone. Crescent Dynamics pauses Series C amid regulatory scrutiny. I read the article 3 times, feeling something between satisfaction and sorrow. Derek's company announced a voluntary pause in their funding round. Industry speak for, the regulators are breathing down our necks. Within a week, 3 board members resigned, citing personal reasons. The company's stock options, which Derek had been bragging about in that recorded call, were suddenly worthless. The dominoes were falling. That evening, I drove past Rachel's client's office in Worthington, one of the tech startups she'd connected with Crescent Dynamics. Through the windows, I could see people packing boxes. The company had announced layoffs that morning. 30 people losing their jobs because they'd invested in a lie that my wife had helped sell. I should have felt guilty. I didn't. 2 days later, Rachel received notice that her Ohio HR consulting license was under review following a complaint about undisclosed financial relationships with client companies. The complaint was anonymous. I'd filed it through the proper channels, using only information that was already on public record. She found me in the garage, where I'd been rebuilding an old bicycle, a project to keep my hands busy while my mind worked through the demolition. "Did you do this?" She held up the licensing board notice, hands shaking with rage. "Tell me the truth, Ethan. Did you file this complaint?" "Do what?" "Don't play games with me. The FTC inquiry into Derek's company. The complaint against my license. This has you written all over it." I set down my wrench. "Your boyfriend's company committed fraud. Your license requires disclosure of financial relationships with clients you recommend." "I didn't make any of that happen, Rachel. You did. You're destroying me. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference." She stepped closer, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married, fierce, intelligent, capable of anything. "I gave you 19 years. I gave you everything. You gave me lies. You gave me hotel receipts and secret credit cards and a boyfriend who's married with kids. Don't stand in my garage and tell me what you gave me. This is vindictive. This is cruel. This is consequences." I picked up my wrench. "You should call a lawyer." The conference temptation happened at an industry event in Cleveland mid-April. Engineers and contractors from across the Midwest. 3 days of presentations and networking. My company had sent me to represent our infrastructure division. Partly recognition of my recent work, partly an excuse to get me out of the house. Her name was Sarah. Structural engineer from Pittsburgh, early 40s, dark hair going silver at the temples. We ended up at the hotel bar after the second day's sessions, trading war stories about impossible clients and budget-slashed projects. "So, what's your situation?" she asked, swirling her bourbon. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The my marriage is imploding look. I wore it for about 2 years before I finally pulled the trigger." I laughed, surprising myself. The first genuine laugh in weeks. "That obvious?" "To someone who's been there?" "Yeah." She told me about her own divorce, husband who couldn't handle that her career had outpaced his, Affairs that started as work lunches and ended with a custody battle. She told me about rebuilding afterward, the loneliness and the freedom, and the slow discovery that life goes on. The hardest part isn't losing them, she said. It's realizing you'd already lost them years ago. You just didn't want to see it. I thought about Rachel's journals, the what-if scenarios, the escape fantasies she'd been nurturing since before we were married. Had I ever really had her? Or just a version she'd constructed to meet my expectations? Sarah was attractive, smart, available, and for one long moment, I let myself imagine what it would feel like to be someone else. Someone who hadn't just discovered his wife's affair. Someone who could flirt with a stranger in a hotel bar without calculating the legal implications. I appreciate the company, I said, standing up, but I'm not in a place to be anyone's revenge date. Sarah smiled, no offense taken. I respect that. But if you ever are, she slid a business card across the bar. Projects sometimes require collaboration. I pocketed the card and went back to my room alone. Lay there in the dark, thinking about how easy it would be to become exactly what Rachel had become. To justify it as evening the score. I wasn't going to do that. Not because I was a saint, but because I was an engineer. I didn't build things that weren't structurally sound, and revenge affairs were about as stable as a bridge made of cardboard. By late April, the dominoes were falling faster than I could count. The FTC had opened a formal investigation into Crescent Dynamics. 3 startups that had invested based on the inflated metrics filed civil suits. Derek Harmon was quietly suspended from his VP position while the company scrambled to contain the damage. And Rachel was watching her empire crumble. Her major clients started dropping. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. An email here. We've decided to bring our HR consulting in-house. A phone call there. Our board has concerns about vendor relationships. The industry whisper network was doing its work, and Rachel's name was becoming synonymous with something toxic. Jim brought me a recording, obtained legally from one of Derek's other affairs, a woman who'd figured out his game and wanted payback. It was 30 minutes of Derek bragging about his system for managing multiple relationships, his schemes for using company resources for personal travel, his absolute certainty that no one would ever catch him. And then, buried in the sleaze, a reference to Rachel. She's the most useful one, Derek's voice said on the recording. Her client list is insane. Tech startups, venture guys, everyone trusts her. Every time she recommends us, it's like getting a free marketing campaign. She knows what she's doing? She knows she's getting paid. She thinks she's in love. He laughed, an ugly, contemptuous sound. They always think they're special. I played that recording 3 times, letting it settle into my bones. Rachel had thrown away our marriage for a man who considered her a marketing asset. A useful one. I forwarded the recording to Vic, Patricia, and the FTC contact line. The virtual HR summit was scheduled for the second week of May, a marquee industry event where Rachel had been invited to deliver a keynote on ethical leadership in remote organizations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew what was happening behind the scenes. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment, cultivating the right connections, feeding information to the right people, setting up the dominoes so they'd fall at exactly the right time. The blogger who would publish the story was a former HR executive herself. She'd been burned by a consulting firm that had similar conflicts of interest, and she was hungry for justice. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah had asked me the night before, during one of our late-night phone calls. We'd stayed in touch since Cleveland. Nothing romantic yet. Just 2 people who understood what it was like to watch a marriage implode. She's about to lecture hundreds of people about ethics while her license is suspended, while her boyfriend's company is under federal investigation, while she's facing potential tax fraud charges. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you're sure about being the one to pull the trigger. I thought about it, really thought about it, the way I'd think about load calculations on a critical support beam. She made her choices. I'm just making sure there are consequences, as long as you're prepared to live with yours. By then, the damage was accelerating. Derek's company had announced layoffs. 3 startups had filed civil suits alleging fraud. Rachel's license was suspended pending review, though that hadn't been announced publicly yet. She still thought she could salvage her reputation. "I need this," she told me the night before the summit. We were in the kitchen, enemy territory now, divided by the island where I'd first confronted her 3 months earlier. If I can deliver this keynote, show that I'm still relevant, still respected, maybe I can rebuild. Rebuild what? Your consulting practice that's about to implode? Your professional network that's going to find out you were sleeping with a fraudster? The keynote is about ethics, about doing the right thing when no one's watching. People need to hear that message. That's remarkable. You're going to lecture hundreds of HR professionals about ethics while your license is under suspension for undisclosed conflicts of interest. You really don't see the problem there? I made mistakes. I'm trying to move forward. You're trying to pretend nothing happened. That's different. She looked at me with something approaching the contempt I'd been feeling for months. You've turned into someone I don't recognize. I was always this person, Rachel. You just stopped looking. The summit was virtual, a Zoom-based conference with hundreds of HR professionals logged in from across the country. Rachel had her ring light set up in her office, presentation slides polished, that confident smile firmly in place. I watched from the living room, laptop open, waiting. Her keynote started at 10 a.m. Building trust in virtual teams, she called it. Slide after slide about transparency, about accountability, about the importance of ethical leadership in the remote work era. The irony dripped from every word. At 10:15, the first message hit the summit's chat function, a link to a blog post titled "The Remote Work Predator: How One Consultant Weaponized Professional Trust." The post, published by an HR industry blogger I'd cultivated for exactly this purpose, laid out everything. The affair with Derek, the undisclosed finder's fees, the fraudulent metrics at Crescent Dynamics, selected excerpts from Rachel's communications, redacted but damning. I'd provided the materials through an encrypted channel, maintaining plausible deniability while ensuring the story would hit exactly when it needed to. I watched Rachel's face on her live stream as the chat exploded, comments scrolling faster than anyone could read. Is this true? And OMG, and someone needs to address this. And I recommended her to my clients. What have I done? Her composure held for about 30 seconds. Professional training kicking in, that HR consultant ability to maintain calm in crisis. Then she saw the specific allegations, the hotel receipts, the redacted excerpts from communications, the timeline that matched her therapy appointments, and client coffees. She stumbled through a slide about authenticity in leadership, while hundreds of comments demanded explanations. Her voice wavered. Her hands shook visibly on camera. I'm going to have to... There seems to be some... She looked off camera, probably at her phone, where the same story was going viral across LinkedIn, Twitter, and every HR industry forum. We're going to take a short break. The summit moderator stepped in, muting Rachel's feed. But it was too late. The story had metastasized. I sat in my living room, laptop balanced on my knees, watching the numbers climb. The blog post had 50,000 views within the first hour. Comments poured in. Some sympathetic, most not. Former clients came forward with their own stories. Industry insiders who'd always suspected something was off finally had permission to say so. My phone buzzed. "Megan, what did you do?" I typed back. "Nothing illegal." That's not what I asked. She gave a speech about ethical leadership. The industry deserved to know who was giving it. Long pause. Then, "You're right. I just didn't think you'd actually do it." By evening, 3 industry publications had picked it up. The headlines wrote themselves: "Remote work consultants double life exposed," and "Ethics keynote turns to scandal," and "The predator in your Zoom meeting." By the next morning, Rachel's biggest clients had terminated their contracts. Her LinkedIn had transformed from a professional showcase to a wasteland of former colleagues distancing themselves. Her consulting website was offline, replaced by a generic under-construction placeholder. I watched it all happen and felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just the cold certainty of consequences finally arriving. Megan's podcast interview dropped a week later. She'd agreed to be interviewed, anonymously at first, then under her own name when she saw the response. She told the story of Rachel's lifelong pattern of escape fantasies, the journals full of alternate lives, the warning signs that everyone had ignored. "I enabled her," Megan said on the recording. "I covered for her. I made excuses. I told myself it was just Rachel being Rachel, restless, ambitious, always looking for the next thing. I didn't want to see what she was becoming. And when you finally did see it, I felt sick. Here's this woman I've known for 25 years, my best friend from college, and I realized I'd never really known her at all. She'd been lying to everyone, her husband, her clients, herself, for so long that I don't think she even knew what the truth was anymore." More damaging was the second guest, Sandra, one of Rachel's former colleagues, who described years of professional manipulation. "She was brilliant at making you feel like you were the most important person in the room," Sandra said. "And then, when you stopped being useful, she'd drop you like you never existed. I watched her do it to 5 or 6 people over the years. I never thought she'd do it to her own husband. I hadn't known about any of that. Maybe I should have. Maybe I'd been too busy engineering bridges to notice the one under my own feet was rotting." Vic filed the divorce papers on a Friday in late May. Ohio's no-fault system meant I didn't need to prove infidelity, but the documentation we'd assembled painted a clear picture of asset dissipation. Under the post-nuptial agreement we'd signed in 2019, marital assets were subject to modification in cases of financial misconduct. Rachel's $47,000 in undisclosed income, her secret credit card debt, her promotion of a fraudulent company while sleeping with its VP, all of it constituted waste under Ohio law. Rachel's lawyers tried to fight it. They claimed emotional distress, painted me as a vindictive spouse weaponizing legal process. They demanded mediation, psychological evaluation, a pause to allow healing. The judge wasn't impressed. "You're asking me to believe," she said during our first hearing, "that your client's undisclosed income, secret credit accounts, and promotional relationship with a company under federal investigation constitute normal marital behavior?" "Your Honor, Mr. Carver's retaliatory campaign has caused my client severe emotional distress. I've reviewed the timeline. Your client's conduct preceded any actions by Mr. Carver. He filed amended tax returns to protect himself from undisclosed income. He exercised his right to control shared home security systems. Nothing in his conduct rises to the level of intentional infliction. The leaked information to industry publications is First Amendment protected. Your client is a public figure in her professional community. Motion to dismiss denied." Rachel was in the courtroom. She looked like she'd aged 10 years since February, gaunt, hollow-eyed, wearing the expression of someone who'd finally realized consequences were real. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw something there. Regret, maybe? Or just exhaustion. The woman I'd married was still in there somewhere, buried under the wreckage of her choices. I looked away. Derek Harmon's arrest came in early June. Federal charges, securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud investors. His company's inflated metrics had suckered investors out of $50 million. The FBI had been building the case for months, and my anonymous tip had accelerated the timeline. Rachel wasn't charged. She'd been a useful idiot, not a co-conspirator, but her professional reputation was beyond salvage. The licensing board's final ruling revoked her certification entirely, citing undisclosed conflicts of interest and conduct unbecoming a licensed HR professional. She tried to contact me once, after the arrest. A voice message I listened to but didn't return. "I know you probably won't call back." Her voice was raw, exhausted. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did. What I threw away. For a man who didn't even remember my birthday. For a man who considered me a marketing asset. I threw away everything." Pause. Shaky breath. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know better than that. I just wanted you to know that I loved you. In my own broken way, I did love you. I'm sorry that wasn't enough." I deleted the message and went back to work. The final confrontation happened 3 weeks before the divorce finalized. Rachel showed up at the house unannounced on a Saturday morning. I was in the garage, working on the bicycle project that had become my therapy. She looked different, thinner, harder, wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual polished professional armor. "We need to talk," she said from the doorway. "I think we're past that." "Ethan, please, just 5 minutes. After 19 years, you owe me that." Against my better judgment, I set down my tools. 5 minutes. She stepped into the garage, looking around at the space that had once been full of her overflow storage boxes. Now it was mine. Workbench, tools, a small fridge with beer. A space for building things. "I've been in therapy," she said, 3 times a week, trying to understand why I did what I did. And? My therapist says I have attachment issues. Fear of intimacy dressed up as restlessness. I created these escape fantasies because real connection terrified me. She laughed bitterly. "Apparently, I've been running from things my whole life, including you. That's convenient. Blame it on a diagnosis." "I'm not blaming anything. I'm trying to explain." She moved closer, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. When Derek reached out, it felt like permission. Permission to be someone else. Someone who hadn't made all the choices I'd made. I told myself it wasn't really cheating because it wasn't really me. "That's insane, Rachel." I know that now." Her voice cracked. "I threw away the only real thing I ever had because I was too scared to admit it was real. I sabotaged my own life because being happy felt like a trap." I let that sit for a moment. Part of me wanted to feel something. Anger, pity, anything. But there was just emptiness where the feeling should have been. "You could have told me you were unhappy. We could have worked on it." I wasn't unhappy. That's what I'm trying to explain. I was happy, and it terrified me. So I burned it down. "Well," I picked up my wrench. "Congratulations. It's burned. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know that ship has sailed." She took a shaky breath. "I'm asking you to understand that I did love you. Not well, not in any way that matters now, but I did. You weren't just a fixture in my life, whatever I said that night. You were the only person who ever saw me clearly, and I hated you for it. You should go, Rachel." "I know." She didn't move. "I just needed you to know that. Before this is final. Before we're strangers." She turned to leave, then stopped at the garage door. "The compass," she said. "The one I gave you for our anniversary. I saw it on the mantle last time I was here when I came to get my things. You kept it. It's a beautiful piece of equipment. It belonged to someone who built the original Broad Street Bridge. Did I tell you that? The dealer said he was a surveyor in the 1890s, worked on infrastructure projects all over Ohio. His wife kept it after he died. passed it down through 3 generations. Rachel, my point is, things outlast the people who make them. Buildings, bridges, marriages, they're all built by flawed people making the best decisions they can at the time. Sometimes those decisions are wrong. Sometimes they're catastrophically wrong. But the intention matters. The effort matters. The intention and effort you put into your hotel visits in Cincinnati? She flinched. I deserved that. You deserve a lot of things. This conversation isn't one of them. She nodded slowly. Goodbye, Ethan. I hope you find someone who's not broken. Then she was gone. I stood in the garage for a long time after, thinking about what she'd said, trying to decide if any of it mattered. It didn't. Not anymore. I went back to work on the bicycle. The divorce finalized in July. Under the terms of the settlement, I kept the house, the majority of our investments, and the retirement accounts I'd built over 20 years. Rachel received a modest payout, enough to survive, not enough to rebuild. She'd moved to an apartment in Hilliard, a small unit in a complex full of people starting over. Her consulting practice was gone. Her professional network was gone. Her relationship with Derek had evaporated the moment federal agents showed up at his door. I heard from Megan occasionally. She'd stayed in touch with Rachel, at least peripherally. Some friendships run too deep to sever completely. She's seeing a therapist, Megan told me over coffee in August. Working through things. She said to tell you she's sorry. Good for her. You don't have to be generous about it. I'm not being anything about it. I'm being done. Megan nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you handled this remarkably. A lot of guys in your position would have fallen apart. I build things for a living. When something fails, you document it, analyze it, and make sure it doesn't happen again. That's all I did. That's not all you did, Ethan. You dismantled her entire life. She dismantled her own life. I just made sure she couldn't use mine as a safety net while she did it. The bridge project in Cleveland wrapped in September. The repairs I'd flagged back in February, the hairline fractures that most engineers would have missed, had prevented what inspectors later determined would have been a catastrophic failure within 18 months. The state engineer's office sent a commendation. My firm gave me a promotion. I stood on the observation deck during the reopening ceremony, watching traffic flow across a structure that would last another 50 years. Engineers don't get credit for disasters that don't happen, but we know what we prevented. My phone buzzed. Sarah, the structural engineer from Pittsburgh. Nice work on Cleveland. Saw the article. You're still avoiding collaboration? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Depends on the project. Dinner sometime? Her response came immediately. I know a place in Youngstown. Halfway point. Saturday? Saturday works. I pocketed my phone and watched the cars stream past. The structure was sound. The load was distributed. Everything held. 6 months later, the German village house finally felt like mine. New paint in the bedroom, new furniture in the living room, a kitchen renovation I'd designed myself. The train still rumbled past on the Norfolk Southern line, but the sound didn't carry the same weight anymore. Just movement. Just life going somewhere else. Sarah and I had settled into something comfortable. Nothing rushed, nothing desperate. She understood damage the way engineers understood damage, as information, not judgment. We spent weekends on projects, her garage door that stuck, my drainage problem in the backyard. The kind of quiet domesticity I'd thought I had with Rachel before I learned it was all built on sand. One evening in February, 1 year since the discovery, I found the surveyor's compass while cleaning out a closet. The anniversary gift Rachel had given me right before everything fell apart. I held it in my hands, turning it over. The brass was still warm from where it had sat in a box, waiting. There was a fire pit in the backyard. I'd used it a few times over the past year, burning old paperwork, some of Rachel's abandoned belongings, things that didn't belong to my new life. I took the compass outside, started a fire, and set it on the stones beside me. Then I didn't burn it. Instead, I put it on the new mantle, next to nothing. No wedding photo. No shared memories. Just a beautiful piece of precision equipment that had belonged to someone who built things that lasted. The compass wasn't responsible for what Rachel had done. And I still loved things that lasted. I went back inside, poured a bourbon, and called Sarah. "What are you up to?" "Reviewing specs for a project in Akron. It's boring. Save me." "Want to come over? I'm grilling something." "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and started prepping the food. The kitchen was warm, the house was solid, and outside the February wind was doing its best to find cracks. It didn't find any. The compass gleamed on the mantle, catching the last light of day. A reminder that things built with precision can last, and that knowing when to demolish is just as important as knowing how to build.